So good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you all to our next session, which is our keynote session on climate and sustainability. And I'm delighted that we have such important and ambassadorial representatives speaking today. So first, we're going to hear from Mahendra Singhi, the CEO of Dalmia Cement. And Mahendra has recently been appointed as the carbon pricing champion, I think, or representative by the World Bank. And of course, many of you, you know him for all of his work within the cement industry and the commitments that Dalmia have made to having a carbon negative footprint by 2040. So I think Dalmia have been probably the most ambitious of all of the cement companies, are really leading the way and setting an example for the rest of us to follow. After Mahendra, we'll hear from Nigel, who's the high-level champion for COP26. And he's not able to join us live, but he's given us a short recording that I'll play for you. And he'll be followed by his assistant, Harald Friedl, who will get into a little bit more detail. And then we'll have a Q&A session with Mahendra and Harald after the presentations. Mahendra, I'll start by handing over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Dear global sisters and brothers, namaskar. Happy to you all. Today, World Cement Association is celebrating its annual day. I take this opportunity to congratulate our WCA chairman, Mr. Song, the board of directors, and particularly the CEO, Mr. Ian Riley, for taking WCA to the global map with inculcation of progressive ideas on current as well as future trends of policies, measures, and technologies. Friends, we experienced a pandemic that has impacted the entire globe in one way or another. It has exacted a horrific human toll and transformed our way of life. The way we work, learn, access products, services, and do our business changed, and every sector, including cement, has been affected by the pandemic. The industry globally, including our cement sector, played a supportive role in serving humanity in the difficult times. Particularly in India, Indian cement sector joined hands with local administration, local society in arranging facilities, equipments, resources to support healthcare infrastructure in our humble possible way. By putting people first, we were able to provide more safety and support to the employees and local communities in the ongoing pandemic. As particularly in India, the positivity rate is now declining. Let us keep our upbeat nature and hopes high in this difficult time. I wish you all excellent health and trust that you are taking care of yourself, your loved ones, and people in need. My dear friends, leaders around the world are working to address the health and economic fallout of COVID-19 crisis, while also confronting the reality of the climate crisis. We know that responding to this amalgamation will require decisive actions. Recent analysis highlights that implementing green strategies for pandemic recovery, along with ambitious climate policies, can have positive short-term and long-term effects in terms of job creation, poverty reduction, GDP growth, and social and equity goals. Hence, there is every reason to follow the recovery path that addresses the fallout of COVID-19 crisis and climate crisis. Now, to highlight importance of actions for eliminating climate crisis, I am taking support of one of the well-known figures of the world, Mr. Bill Gates, by quoting few extracts of his TED interview on innovative innovations we need to avoid climate disaster. What he said is the greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere, particularly CO2, stays there for thousands of years. Presently, over 51 billion tons per year of GHGs are emitted, and we have to drive those all the way down to zero, The key contributors to the global GHG emissions are refrigeration, along with other heating and cooling, which makes up about 6% of total emissions. Agriculture, which produces our food, accounts for 18%. Electricity is responsible for 27%. Transportation, including shipping, contributes 16%. Now, making materials, concrete, steel, plastic, glass, aluminum, and everything else accounts for almost 31% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is roughly 1/3 of total anthropogenic GHG emissions. And in fact, this is one of the most difficult for us to solve. Working at this great scale requires shifts such as carbon neutral global economy. We know that there is a great awareness in this regard, and maybe more than 70% of the global GDP, including US, has already committed to becoming carbon neutral by near mid-century. Of course, China has proposed the year 2060. The net zero commitments are also being taken voluntarily by companies, cities, municipalities, and communities also. A big transformation is already underway at a regional and global scale, and it will drive the policy, technology, sustainable markets, and consumer behavior in years to come. As highlighted today in the morning by our WCA chairman, Mr. Song, in the context of China regarding CO2 emissions peaking and net zero targets, it is certain that economy-wide scale of targets would ultimately be driven down to sector and then to the companies. Though it has been very well highlighted by Mr. Song in his keynote speech, let me again share the broad decarbonization levers in the heavy industry sector, such as cement and steel. In the industrial sector, maybe there are 6 main pathways to the decarbonization, and let me highlight that. The first one I would call renewable energy generation through solar or wind. Solar and wind energy is estimated to become more economical with new inventions and efficiency increase. Particularly, the low-cost solar electricity has the key to decarbonization of the industry. Second, use of waste heat for fossil fuel electricity generation through waste heat recovery systems. WHRS is the most economical power generation technology and catered to 25% power demand in cement industry. China, Japan had taken the lead, and now India is also inching towards doing its best. The third one, the use of sustainable biomass as an energy source for heat production to replace fossil fuels. With new technologies, with solar energy available at economical rate, using green hydrogen as a heat source or as a reduction agent. Fifth, direct electrification of industrial processes, in particular, the generation of high temperature heat can also avoid fossil fuel. And lastly, but the most important is carbon capture and utilization, which can be applied to multiple industrial processes, including cement, power, steel, etc. Dear ladies and gentlemen, in my view, CCU technology can bring down 60% of the GHG emissions from cement production by converting captured CO2 in a useful raw material to make various products. Considering the impact of CCU for the whole industry and maybe for the whole globe, it can be termed as climate vaccine. It can be termed as climate vaccine for the climate crisis. Carbon Management Research Initiative at Columbia University's Center on Global Policy examined 19 CO2 recycling pathways to understand the opportunities and the technical and economic limits of CO2 recycling products, which is gaining market entry and reaching a global scale. The findings released in May 21 highlight that CO2 recycling pathways could deliver deep emission reductions when supplied by low carbon electricity and chemical feedstocks. CO2 recycling pathways have the combined potential to abate 6.8 gigatons of CO2 per year. Quite big, quite substantial. The report further highlights that some CO2 recycling pathways have reached market parity today, while the remaining pathways cost are high. Electrochemical carbon monoxide production, ethanol from lingo cellulosic biomass, and concrete carbonation curing all have an estimated cost of production lower than the product selling price. In my view, these pathways, proving beneficial today, have a combined carbon abatement potential of 1.6 gigatons of CO2 per year. These cost estimates, which I have talked, are global. However, they may be substantially lower or higher in particular, depending on the locations and the context. As more green policies reach the global and regional landscape through unleashing the full potential of the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, it is more likely that full 6.8 gigatons of CO2 recycling potential would become a reality with integrated value creation besides natural capital alone. I would also highlight a Deloitte report of 2020 titled The 2030 Decarbonization Challenge, the path to the future of energy. It elaborates the idea of carbon recycling in a circular economy principle that connects to clean and green business philosophy is profitable and sustainable. The report highlights that instead of pondering how to dispose of CO2 and other waste, many companies may benefit by 2030 view everything that produce, including emissions, byproducts, and end products as a resource can trade to create economic value. And this will speak of wealth created by using the waste. Today, Mr. Song also informed about the progress on CCU projects in China. My congratulations to Conch Anhui and CNBM for starting CCU early demonstrations, and I would encourage all WCA members and technology providers to explore its implementation. At Dalmia Cement in India, we have also started working on 0.5 million ton per annum CCU project in one of the cement plant. The project activity is under feasibility study, and it is being done with the support from Asian Development Bank. Now, captured CO2 can act as a renewable material and play an essential role in the circular economy. For example, CO2 can directly produce fertilizer, beverages, textiles, food, and can be used in many other industries. Of course, many products are at lab scale, such as synthetic fuels, proteins, carbon rods, and inorganic compounds. And day by day, month by month, the list is only growing. One of the critical factors to make CCU viable and cost effective would be the economics of renewable electricity. The whole purpose of highlighting CCU in greater detail is that it has to be explored fully so that it can reduce almost 2.5 to 3% of global emissions by capturing total CO2 emissions of cement industry. Now, to take care of various clean tech and various clean technologies, what is required is project-based viability gap funding through green grant and green finance for demonstration projects in developing countries. The collaboration among industrial sector is also critical. It may be possible to create CCU zones based on the raw material and the need of the industries. Similarly, to further boost the CCU-derived products, it must introduce green procurement policies for the green product in the public and the private sector. Besides, we also need unrestricted international carbon market to make green projects viable. You may be aware that Article 6 of the Paris Climate Agreement highlights a market-based approach, and it needs to be quickly exercised by the world under the leadership of UN and COP26 presidency. Having realized the importance of clean climate and net zero economy, as highlighted by, again, Chairman Mr. Song, WCA has constituted a zero carbon steering committee of WCA board to take the way forward and constitute a plan. Today, in my role as carbon pricing champion of the World Bank supported Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, as well as COP26 business leader, let me call upon all the leaders of cement sector and all technology providers to come forward and create strategy for clean climate actions in all parts of our life and the industry. As you may already know, COP26 is scheduled in November in Glasgow this year in UK. It is an opportunity for WCA and its members to showcase our positive climate actions to the world so that they can appreciate and further actions of WCA members can be replicated globally. It is also time to prepare ourselves for transitioning from grey to green, and for the net zero carbon economy, so as to lead the change and be the lead change agent. To further highlight its importance and way forward, COP26 high-level champion, Mr. Nigel, who is leading the globe for Race to Zero under COP26 presidency, would also share his thoughts in next couple of minutes. About Dalmia Cement, friends, now let me highlight that our organization's climate actions and commitment has taken us forward as a global leader in cement sector. Let me share that we have implemented many of the above initiatives and we have become one of the lowest carbon footprint cement company globally and one of the India's most profitable cement company. Our business philosophy of clean and green is profitable and sustainable is a force multiplier for sustainable and clean climate actions in our company. I'm happy to share that we were the first heavy industry company globally to commit to the carbon negative cement roadmap in 2018. Our carbon negative roadmap covers both conventional and without box solutions for deep decarbonization. Compared to the 1990 baseline, ladies and gentlemen, we have already reduced our carbon footprint by 43%, and a bulk of it, about 30%, happened in past 7 years. We have been recognized as one of the innovative company in climate change mitigation by the UN Secretary General. BBC World also recognized Dalmia as one of the 5 climate defender. And we are ranked globally #1 on business readiness for low carbon economy transition by the leading international organization, CDP. Now, let me say, I would like to highlight finally that the current need is to strive for fulfilling a larger purpose, that is to ensure our present and future generations are assured of clean climate and sustainable world. In this regard, more we work towards carbon avoidance and carbon removal, the better we would be able to secure the present and future of our planet. I want to conclude now, friends, my speech with one of the famous quotes from the global leader of the century, Mahatma Gandhi, which is, a person is but the product of his thoughts. A person is but the product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. What you think, you will become. The moment you think of net zero, you would become in time to come. All we need is to do and to align our thoughts and become the product of these thoughts. That is net zero by the mid-century as a clean, green, profitable, and sustainable cement sector. I must thank you for your patient hearing, as well your keenness to make the world of today and tomorrow better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahendra. That was great. I just like to congratulate Dalmia on the fact that you're accelerating your carbon reduction, and really an example. You know, what the industry as a whole, we've struggled with a slowing rate of carbon reduction over the last 10 years, and it's a real inspiration to see you going in the opposite direction, accelerating that. And of course, your carbon negativity commitment is also, you know, something that makes people wake up and think, okay. And I think, as you say, that the technology that is available today and becoming more feasible given the price of carbon does make it possible for us to go from being, you know, a large carbon emitter to a large carbon sink. So maybe we can explore that a little bit more in the Q&A. So thank you very much for that. And next, I'd like to move on, as Mahendra mentioned, to playing a short speech from Nigel. So let me see if I can get the technology set up here. Yes, here he is. So I'll play this, and then we'll ask Harald to continue on from Nigel's comments.
Yes, here's the hero.
Hello, my name is Nigel Topping, and I'm the high-level climate action champion for COP26, which will take place in Glasgow in November this year. And I'm honoured to address you today. Unfortunately, due to urgent travel plans, I'm not able to be with you live, but it's great to have the chance to spend a few moments with you. I'd like to thank the WCA for organising this important event and welcome all of you, the members of the World Cement Association, colleagues from all over the world, and particularly the large and fast-growing economies of Asia. It's great to see and hear that this WCA Day is covering really important topics, not only about the future of the industry, but about climate change and sustainability and gender diversity. In my role, I have the privilege every day to work with the private sector and local governments to drive accelerated action on climate change. There's so much going on. Just in the last few months, we see increasing massive investments in hydrogen. There's a 26 gigawatt project taking place in Western Australia. We see the move towards electric vehicles accelerating really fast. So we're seeing the phase out of combustion engines with, you know, Mercedes saying 2039, General Motors 2035, Ford in Europe 2030, Volvo 2030, and cities all around the world looking to clean up their air, driving that as well. And a few weeks ago with Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, we launched the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero with 160 asset owners, asset managers, and banks all committing to getting to net zero by 2050, some of them by 2040. So there's lots of momentum, and it's great to be here today with you, particularly to see so much participation from Asia. Of course, cement being such an important sector for the global economy, particularly the growing economies, but also such a challenge because it represents 8% of global emissions. Great news is we've seen this sudden wave of net zero commitments. Of course, President Xi Jinping committing China to being net zero by 2060, and we've seen in the 2050 commitments from Japan and South Korea and others. And I know that this means that many cement producers are recognizing that there's an urgency now to find solutions, but also an opportunity to really be driving innovation. And there's great examples to draw from. In China, for example, the track record of the cement industry in reducing NOx emissions in the last few years. And we know that the Asian economies are real powerhouses of innovation with so many patents originating there. At the end of last year, the WCA president called on cement industry leaders to unite around climate leadership and fair competition. That was an important signal. Since then, in May this year, the WCA launched its climate partnership to foster collaboration with the wider hard-to-abate and climate change sector. And with this focus on the development of net zero decarbonisation roadmaps, which is something we firmly believe in, with the right national and international partnerships within the cement and concrete ecosystem, we can really see also the addition of a gender focus to promote women's empowerment and greater diversity, which itself is key to innovation. Also great to see CEOs in your network in China and India stepping up and giving clear commitments as well as short-term goals. I'd like to congratulate my friend, the Dalmia CEO, Mahendra Singhi, one of the most outspoken voices globally, not just within the cement industry, but within industry. I think you're in for a treat with his panel on climate change and sustainability, and I know he's going to speak to you about how to turn a hard-to-abate sector, which sounds like something really difficult, into an innovate-to-abate sector, which is something really exciting. We have huge challenges ahead, let's not kid ourselves, but we already have very exciting examples of innovations, such as the recent X Prize awards in the US to Carbon Cure, injecting CO2 into concrete mix, and Carbon Built, modifying the concrete mix. And of course, other exciting technologies like the one from Blue Planet. And I think we're going to hear from Carbon Cure and Blue Planet later on today. It's great to see such an old industry becoming such an innovative one. And I encourage you all to tell that story. We know the big challenge here, and it's economics, how to take the carbon out of the built environment without making it too expensive. We can see growing carbon prices, both statutory and voluntary, which undoubtedly will be a drive. We also see competing technologies like cross-laminated timber. So the innovation race is not just within your industry, but more broadly in the built environment. With my colleague Gonzalo Munoz, we've created the Race to Zero, a global campaign to encourage all businesses and cities and investors to commit to getting to net zero commitment emissions by 2050 with clear short-term targets and plans. We have over 700 cities, over 2,400 businesses, and investors with $70 trillion of assets globally already joining our efforts in the Race to Zero. And my colleague Harald's going to tell you more about that in a few minutes. Already from your sector, Dalmia, Lafarge Holcim and Cementos Argos have joined, and we'd love to see many more cement and concrete companies from all over the world joining. We'd like to see a tipping point in the sector to show that your sector is committed to the Paris Agreement and getting to net zero. And we'd love to help you make green cement be one of the real breakthrough stories of 2021 and of COP26. I wish you and your organizations all the very best of luck and success on the way forward. I look forward to hearing from you soon about your commitments to join the Race to Zero and about the innovations that your teams are driving towards that green cement future. Looking forward to lots of positive collaborations and to hearing more about your day, and I wish you a very good day. Goodbye.
So that was a very interesting perspective there, and one from outside the cement industry, which is one we need to hear more often, of course. Can I hand over to you, Harald, to just elaborate on some of the themes? I think you're on mute, Harald. You're on mute.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Mahendra. Thank you, Ian, for the opportunity to share with you. Thank you all attendees of the WCA Day, and thank you for the WCA team for making it all happen. These online global meetings are always an interesting challenge and at the same time a unique opportunity for us to really come together. Yeah, I'm Harald, and I work in Nigel Topping's and Gonzalo Munoz's team. So these are the champions of COP25 and COP26. A wonderful opportunity to work as a Chilean emerging economy together with the UK presidency, a more established economy. And we all know COP27 will happen in Africa. So we also soon going to have African colleagues. I think where the cement industry is also very important. And in Nigel team, we are about 60 people now globally that only have one task: to raise the ambition around climate action. And for this, we can't do this alone. For this, we all need you. The people who are working in the companies, like Dalmia, but many others, obviously. The people working in the organizations, Ian, you and your team. The people who work in the think tanks, in the NGOs, and in the governments, city governments, regional governments, and in the national governments. Without them, and without all of us working together, the systems change that Nigel was talking about won't happen. So it is a different awareness that we are seeing now, I believe, than that we had in Paris 2015 with the Paris Agreement, because there's a big acknowledgement that the automotive industry can't change that fast if you wouldn't have leadership from cities, leadership from companies and the innovators, but also leadership from the policymakers that now make it happen. And please, let's not forget investment. I think we all know, and it has been mentioned this morning, the change in the sector, the cement and concrete industry, will be one of the most expensive ones because the structures need to be changed. It's a very competitive local industry. It's very innovative players. So the investors will need to invest into the business cases that are emerging at the moment. So we talked a lot about leadership. And I think that's the broader topic why I myself, having lived in Asia for 6 years, I lived in Thailand and Myanmar. I worked a lot with China. I'm very enthusiastic to work at the moment. I'm based in Europe, in Amsterdam, to again engage with my Asian friends and colleagues. And sometimes the business mindset is very different, but the personal mindset is very different. I think that's important to understand. So in this race to zero that Nigel was talking about, I'm trying to give a big push and opportunity to Asian and not only Western leaders to participate. And that's my big request to you. Please follow up. I think Ian and the team will share Nigel and mine email address, will share the presentation and I'm going to give to you. Please don't hesitate to follow up. Dalmia and Mahendra can be a testimonial for what we are doing. It is really a global effort where people who want to show leadership now can show that leadership. And that's the goal of all of us together. And Mahendra, you mentioned obviously carbon pricing. I think if we now make the solutions possible, we have to be less afraid of later on paying high prices for the carbon, because we got to invest in the solutions now. And it's going to pay off. We all know that business modeling is challenging. We'll all recognize that. But at the same time, it can't be an excuse to delay further investments now into the solution for the future. So again, Mahendra, thank you for the big, also the many investments you guys are doing around CCUS, which is something still not happening fast enough. I would like to give you a quick overview of what this race to zero means. Nigel mentioned some key points, who is part of it. And it's a very simple one that you can get involved in. The most important is put all the questions into the chat or after my presentations And if you want, Ian and colleagues, just interrupt me. I'm going to share my screen for a couple of minutes to go into the presentation mode and show you the Race to Zero presentation. So it's we are now running actually 3 races at the same time. The Race to Zero, very important, but at the same time, we saw in the last months how important the Race to Resilience is, to really work with the global, not only slum dwellers, but people who don't live in appropriate circumstances, where cement and concrete has to play a very big role. I think India is a prime example. I think, I guess many parts of China too. I can attest to many other Asian countries where this is still very needed. So the Race to Resilience is as important as the Race to Zero. And then the last third race that is picking up speed at the moment is the Race to Trillions, the trillions of dollars and euros, or Bitcoin, if you want to use that, that we have to use to invest into the change now. Just to give you a bit of background, what Nigel and Gonzalo are doing, in 2015, there was an agreement by the UN that they thought, okay, maybe it's not enough if only the countries, the ministers, are negotiating with each other. How do we bring in investors? How do we bring in businesses? How do we bring in civil society? And I think especially in Asian context, also faith-based groups. They're fantastic faith-based groups. If you look in India, if you look in China, if you look in Thailand, that do great work. All of those, the civil society organizations included, need to be involved into the race to climate ambitious and resilient, and the Mahendra, as you said, in the clean, green, and sustainable future. That's what we need for the future generations. It's our big task. It's our last chance to turn around the wheel. So the Global Climate Action Champion mandate was invented only 6 years ago. And the role grew and grew, and there's never been a bigger team like now. So many companies who support, many NGOs who support, see the importance of this work on the highest level, integrating the discussion between the member states of the UN with what businesses are doing. And I've worked in business myself. I was the CEO of a renewable energy company. Without the fast speed and innovation power of business, many things don't happen as fast as we need them to be. And so Nigel and Gonzalo as a duo have been pushing for 2050 goals and make sure the ambition is becoming higher and higher, but also making clear to businesses and say, you have to have a credible 2030 goal. That is important. Then it's getting more scary. It's also getting more real. And I'm sure many companies who are on the call today can attest to that. And I can assure you, I'm working on the heavy industry team. I'm myself an innovation expert, a systems change expert. I work also with the aluminum and steel sector with my colleague. It's everywhere the same challenge. You are not alone. The cement industry is not special. It is the systemic change that needs to run structurally, and that's very difficult in all global sectors I have seen. Finance included, by the way. Maybe there it's the most difficult. So our goal is to raise ambition, to bring people along and make them agree to a plan that recognizes we can't do it alone. Net zero, as I think as our Indian friends, they're all very poetic, much better described clean, green, sustainable, like this much better, Mahendra. But I think net zero has become also a term that many people can understand. It's a financial language, it's a business language, it's a civil society language. And we want to therefore demonstrate with this journey to net zero that we can achieve a better world for all of us. That's possible. And what's underway is a transition that we need to accelerate. These are our 3-legged approach. Nigel gave you a couple of numbers before. These are numbers that are going up every single day. So you are absolutely not alone if you're joining this coalition. And we haven't set up a separate coalition. I'm going to go into this a bit later. Many of you who have intended to join certain networks and coalitions already, we have taken them all together and built a so-called umbrella initiative where we are counting all of these because we are saying it's a global effort of the United Nations family, and that's where the mandate of the global champion is coming from. So it's over 2,000 businesses. There are more and more regions and cities, and we know this, and we have seen this in the United States the last years when even the national government wanted to defy and didn't want to comply with any of the agreements that have been made in Paris. Cities and regions are very resilient, and they are coming up everywhere. There are amazing mayors all over the world and regional leaders that are standing up. more than 150 investors now with trillions in asset are committing, and there are institutions, NGOs that are supporting. And so we always encourage also organizations like the WCA and the GCCA, another organization in that field, to raise the flag and say, we want to be part of this race to zero. We hope, and Nigel talked about this as well, that the event, the climate change negotiation, will happen in person. Because of the delay last year, it was supposed to happen in November, we got an extra year of work. And this was really important to invest in systems change. Often the mandate is going for a year, which is nearly too fast. So by November, we hope that actually a third of the global population is part of this race. So you're definitely not alone. 25% of global emissions should be covered by then, and a third of the global economy should pull this horse into the right direction of change. And we are seeing more and more uptake, and this makes me very happy, in emerging economies. That is key, because this is where the leadership and the growth is coming from. Another graph on showing that we have nearly doubled since in a year between June 2020 and May 2021 in the commitments that we have achieved with our partners. And as Nigel wants to always underline, it's not an empty promise, and we're definitely not supporting white and greenwashing. That is very important. So again, Ian will be able, and Mahendra, to connect you with people who have been on the journey. It's possible. Mahendra, you are nodding. It's challenging, but it's worthwhile. And you need to pledge, plan, proceed, and publish. These are the criteria. And there's a scientific committee where pledges are being submitted to. So we are making sure that this is not used for PR purposes only. It's very important to communicate about it, but the impact goes first. So you, to be able to be part of this race to zero, there needs to be a pledge coming from the head of the organization that says we want to go to net zero as soon as possible. Within a 12-month plan, you set interim targets that are representing a fair share, we're often saying, of the 50% reduction that should be seen by 2030. That is important. So 2030 targets have to be set. And then proceed with a meaningful action plans that lays out what you're doing over the next 12 months. And obviously we are together publishing progress. We are celebrating the successes as a global community. And I think that has been always reflected very positively to the stakeholders and shareholders of any company that has been involved. And Ian, I will not talk about all the details of the slides. They're also used as an outreach material. And I'd like to encourage you, Ian, to make them available so that we have interest. And I'm happy to also book a separate session if this is needed, if more companies are interested to go through a detailed criteria, and even invite somebody from the scientific committee so we can talk about the challenges of the cement sector. 3 companies so far are part of this. So this is Dalmia, Lafarge, and Argos from South America. And the leadership principles are very, very important for us. It needs to be leadership. We are working on principles of information sharing while respecting, obviously, the competitive space that we are in, especially the cement and concrete industry. There is an important way of capacity building in that process also involved. And together, we are also supporting and drawing up these pledges, plans, and action. It's all linked towards the Paris Agreement and its implementation. Some of our partners on that slide, some of them you might have seen, big city organizations like ICLE or the Under 2 Coalition, which is working a lot with regions. B Corp is a part of this movement too. SMEs, if you're an SME and not maybe a multinational or a big player, also an opportunity to engage. We see a lot of tractions from near hundreds of thousands of SMEs that are standing up. UN Global Compact, some of you will work with, and the business ambition for 1.5 is launched under the umbrella of the Global Compact, Science-Based Target Initiative. So we are working with all of those to ensure additionality. We're doing it together. We don't want to set up, as Nigel said, a separate initiative. That's a very useful slide to create a lot of clarity. So if you have a large business, you would be more than 500 employees, for example, you would be on the left side of this slide. And some of you might have looked into the business ambition for 1.5, the exponential roadmap, the climate pledge, the future net zero, business declares and pledge to net zero. These are all different initiatives that people and companies are getting part of, depending also on the sector. But if you're part of one of those, you're automatically part of the race to zero. If you're considering, you're a big company, please look at any of these opportunities, and you therefore can become, that becomes your funnel, your roadmap on how to approach us. SME Climate Hub, a very good initiative from the UK presidency, also ensures we have an opportunity to engage SMEs. Please, this is important, the backbone of many industries. B Corps, we have been discussing before, is another platform. Then you have in different sectors, but not in the cement industry. For example, in fashion, Charter would ensure that the fashion industry is becoming part of it. And we are very, very happy and proud to see financiers really come together in the net zero asset owner and asset manager alliance. So that's a very important vehicle for us to ensure not only business innovation, policy innovation is happening, but also the money is starting to flow into the right direction, which is important for all of the CEOs to also plan with. So that was a big overview. We would love to join you as an actor, as a company. There are different ways also to support the race, but I believe most of the people on the call are today businesses. There you could become a champion, a supporter of the process if you're an organization or an NGO. And we believe that together we can use social media platforms, communication tools, we can call to act to other people in the industry, provide technical support and peer-to-peer engagement. That's what we can incentivize people with. And companies often join because they are recognized as leaders. They are recognized as people who care. They are recognized as people who are engaging their employees who want to become part of the net zero game. That's what we often see of company. Very, very important motivation is not only the insight of a CEO or what your stakeholders and shareholders are saying, but it's your own employees that want to take action. It's an opportunity to share your knowledge, play a part in one of the most important climate conferences we have ever seen. And I think a young climate activist reminds us of this urgency every single day. It's the last generation that can do something about it. And members will be supported on the way. So I think that's what we can offer. I think it's a very interesting opportunity to work on this together. We want to accelerate the race. That's what I shared with you. I'll make sure with WCA we are sharing this presentation. I'd love that you get in touch, that we can follow up in a deeper conversation, or that you just express your interest to join. We're happy to follow up on any questions. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Mahendra, for the time on this panel that Nigel and I have. And bless you all over the world. Good evening, good night, and good morning. And I hope we can create a lot of good action together for a clean, green, sustainable world that is being kept safe for our future generations. Thank you very much.
So Harald, thank you very much. And we've got a few minutes left where we will have time for discussion and Q&A. So to all of you who are participating and listening to this discussion, then please do let us have your questions, and we'll try and get to those. So maybe I could just pick up on something, Harald, that you were talking about 2030. And Mahendra, also you were talking about accelerating climate change. I think that there seems to be a feeling now that just setting a 2050 target, is fine as an ambition, but if we really want to move things forward, it's not helpful. We need something that is much more within our planning horizons. I wonder, Harald, whether or not you had seen companies changing the way they're thinking about these targets and recognizing that need for the shorter term target.
Mahendra, please go first. You were saying something. Yeah. So, Mr. Ihan, if I respond, I would say that when we become part of Race to Zero, when we commit for net zero by 2040, 50, or 60, then there has to be a plan. First, broad plan of each 5 years, and then that has again to be broken up year by year, and it has to be correlated with actions and the quantification of the carbon footprints. Like you might have seen Dalmia Cement's plan that we have now year by year, we know that against global average of 800 kg per ton of cement as carbon footprint, we have brought it down to 472 kg. And we know that in case of 2030, it has to reach to 330 or 360 kg. So every action has to be linked with every carbon footprint reduction. Then it will make sense. But otherwise, like you said, that one can have wish, one can have ambition of 2050. But what next year? What in 2025? What in 2030? And I think this is rightly done by US also, that they will bring down their emissions, reduce 50% by 2030. So this is how I think each industry, each country have to move forward.
Yeah. Harald, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a true change to this. I've been observing in the last 2 or 3 years with many leaders recognizing it differently. And Mahendra, I have to quote behind you, Swami Vivekananda.
Yes.
You can do anything and everything. I think that is becoming something that hopefully gets into consciousness of people. And it's a very interesting times. I think that the COVID crisis also has shown us that we can, if we, whatever we think about the collective action and why it has happened, we can actually bring down emissions globally. We can get people behind the same goals of health, a healthier economy, of a more local economy. So the awareness is starting to be there. I think if the CEOs now realize we can take the action, it's also supported by the investors and the employees, I think there will be less angst and fear of setting a 2050 target. Yes, I have seen also CEOs sometimes change also in this industry, their speak fundamentally. Suddenly net zero becomes part of what they want to do, and resilience. And that gives me a lot of hope. So not everybody is yet on the 2030 game, but it becomes basically the next thing that we have to do right now at 2050. Everybody should have FOMO, the fear of missing out and not having a 2050 target. I think the next leadership group will set very clear and ambitious goals for 2030. So short answer to your question, we see it happening. And I think if we have 20% of global leaders, the rest hopefully has to follow, because the policy environment will shift dramatically.
Yeah, okay, good. I'd like to be slightly provocative. In this company, it's quite difficult to be provocative because the two of you, of course, are extremely ambitious in terms of these goals. But Mahendra, you were talking about CCU and the CCU technologies that are available today. And of course, this is also in the context of carbon prices increasing. So we've seen carbon prices in the European ETS at sort of 50 euros or something around this. In the UK, it's about £50 a ton. And on the voluntary carbon markets, we're seeing prices over $50 a ton. In fact, some of them very much higher, but those are rather small quantities. But even in reasonable quantities, over $50 a ton. So quite interesting that the voluntary markets are also valuing particularly, in fact, carbon usage, the kind of mineralization technologies that we think about in the building industry. Now, when we look at all of that, and it seems to me that the challenge is really making these economically feasible. We know these technologies work. It's a question of whether they can make sense economically. And with the sort of carbon prices we have now, perhaps just getting to zero is really too easy an ambition. And we should really be aiming for the cement and concrete industries to become a large-scale carbon sink. Do you think that's too much of a dream, or do you think that is something that is achievable?
First, I would say dream is must. You have to dream, and then you can only act. You know, the way we dreamed, we started acting. Without dream, you won't go forward. I think the concept of race to zero, it was dreamed, and then one by one, people are joining. And one thing which industry or the society has to understand is, particularly the climate actions cannot be economical from the day one. But I'm sure all these will be economical after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And at the same time, what we have to also understand is the cost of inaction. We do understand cost of action is X dollar per ton and all this. But cost of inaction is the loss of lives, big cost. So I would say that each and every company has to start understanding that let me address carbon as a possible resource, not the waste. And for that purpose, what are the ways and means by which the carbon can be ultimately lead to some useful material? And if that concept comes in, and for that purpose, even Elon Musk is offering his propositions. Bill Gates is working on it. Many innovators are working. Many companies like us are working. That yes, it may cost extra in few years, but ultimately it will make sense, because you are also saying that in voluntary carbon market, particularly I was hearing from a few parties that in US now companies are ready to give $200 a ton for carbon avoidance, $250 a ton for carbon avoidance. And I think they are doing the right thing. It's not that since they have the money power, so they are giving, but they are giving for making good the future generation. So I think finally I would conclude, let us dream like what UN had dreamed, what countries had dreamed, what race to zero is the dream. And then definitely we will get the results.
Okay. Thanks. I have a question that I'd like to put to you, Harald. It comes from Anne de Korkelaar, and she asks, many cement companies worldwide are small and family-owned plants with, or companies with 1 or 2 plants. They can represent a high percentage of the total. So how can we incorporate them in the path to net zero? Part of it, of course, is knowledge sharing, and maybe I'll say a few words about that after you've replied. But how can they join in the path to net zero?
Yeah, it is the SME Climate Hub, and I'm happy to share the link. It also will be on the message. It's particularly made for commitments for family-owned businesses, SMEs. Ian, if you feel comfortable, please connect this person with me, as I have not gone down the route myself accompanying a family-owned small business or medium-sized business. I'd like to help to support this, because I think these are the next step on the way where family businesses are very strong supporters. I'd like to help you, and it would be at the moment under the umbrella of the SME Climate Hub.
And Mr. Ian, I can also say that you can also refer our name and our Mr. Anupam Badola. He can definitely support these companies, how to, we can share our journey. We can share that how we reach to zero, and along with Harald, we can support these companies.
Well, that's great. And of course, as you know, we have the Pegasus program that we were talking about this morning, which is a benchmarking and knowledge sharing approach, which is really specifically designed to help the smaller companies who don't have a lot of resources. So I'd encourage them to join WCA and participate in that Pegasus program. And of course, Dalmia and also our colleagues in China are participating in that. So you can get the input from large companies that are already going on this journey and sharing that knowledge. So we have another question here from Ashim Kumar Bhattacharya, and he asks, with biomass fuel being a prominent part in net carbon zero, thus requiring huge lands for its farming and production, how to manage it as the world is also planning to urbanize every nook and corner? So I think you have some particular comment on this, Mahendra.
Yes. Yes, one, I would say biomass would definitely require huge land on which we can generate, we can plant energy plants. Like when we did the study in India with the support of the Indian government, then we could find that there are almost 30 million hectares, 30 million hectares wasteland available in the country. And if those wastelands are given by the government on lease, then surely you can grow many type of plants which can act as a biomass for power plant, biomass, for cement plant. And you are aware that we have identified now bamboo plants, which can act as an energy plant, and that can definitely be one of the source for replacing fossil fuel. So it is possible. Only thing is, let us not worry much. Let us start acting.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the other point to make on this question of biomass being used as fuel, you know, when we talk about this or the CCU initiatives or the LC3, you know, we need all of these. You know, this is not this particular thing has to solve all of our problem. We need many, many solutions in order that between them they solve the problem. So I'm sure that the questioner here is correct that this is a land limited issue, but it can make a contribution, and I think that's really the key takeaway. I don't know, Harald, if you have any other comment on this topic.
No, I
No?
think it's a
Okay.
topic well known. I think Mahendra has answered the business specifics. The world population growth is a challenge in itself. We know that, not only for the cement industry, but I want to leave it there.
And you know, yeah, like we are working on regenerative agriculture. So how such plants can be planted and grown, which grows very fast like bamboo. So this is going to happen, and we'll have to start with the small steps so that it can in totality become bigger, like what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gentlemen, I think we should probably wrap it up. I'm sure we could happily continue talking for a long time, but I'm sure you have other things to do as well. So, Mahendra Singhi from Dalmia Cement and Harald Friedl from the COP26 team, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed Harald and Nigel and Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.